Hey ladies, got a struggle? Need to vent? It's time to join your voice and get down to business with some critical thought, where like-minded ladies share their personal experiences to empower each other, using critical thinking to make wise decisions. And now, here's your host, Lady C.
Hi, this is Lady C, and welcome to another episode of The Critical Thought. I am pleased to announce my next guest, Alexandra James, and she, if you don't know who she is the person that has the channel JW Victims. And not only does Alexandra have a YouTube channel, but she also just released a book. And the name of the book, How to Reclaim Your Life When It's Been Stolen from You. And also, she is the editor-in-chief of the Apostate Monthly magazine. This coming April will be her 5th month. So be sure to check her out online so that you can get her book and you can check out the magazine. Alexandra, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
Well, Alexandra has been spending a lot of time covering other people's issues and stories. We're now going to talk a little bit about her. So Alexandra, you want to give us a little bit of background about how you became one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, very briefly, I was not technically born in. My mother, she was separated from my biological father. She was living with the man who was going to go on to be my stepfather. They had a wedding date picked out and all of that. I was about 5 years old, and there was a knock on the door, and it was 2 Jehovah's Witnesses. And they left her, if you're old enough to remember, the truth book, little blue book. That was what they studied back then. So she and my stepfather, they got married through the course of all this. They started their study. They got through their course of study. At the end of it, my stepfather was ready to stop studying, and my mother was ready to get baptized. So she got baptized. It was the summer right after I had turned 6 years old. So again, not technically born in, but really it's the only life, that I ever knew, that I ever remembered in all of that. So raised as a witness.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. At your age, that was your formative years. So of course, that's all you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alexandra, do you want to talk a little bit about your mom and what made her want to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
I think it's important to talk about a wide range of experiences that people have as witnesses, especially those who choose to become a witness, like my mother did. She was in her early 20s, by this time. One of the things about my mother is that she was not raised as a witness, obviously, but she had a really, really bad childhood, very abusive, very neglectful. She was one of 10 children, a very poor household, all of that. There was a lot of, I don't know about physical abuse, but verbal abuse, and there was sexual abuse as well when she was growing up. Her mother, my grandmother, did not handle it properly, when presented with it. The point in all of that is that my mother at this time in her life, in her early 20s, she should have been under the care of a very good psychiatrist. And she should have been working hard to heal herself mentally and emotionally from what was going on. My biological father, I don't know him. When they divorced, he took off, that type of person. But I do understand there was probably some violence, some abuse. When she moved in with the man who went on to be my stepfather, now at that time, it seemed like a very calm environment. The one thing I will give to my stepfather is that he always worked. So I always had a roof over our heads, right? This was a perfect time for her to take advantage of that, this relative new calm in her life, and go and see a therapist and get what she needed, the real help that she needed. Instead, she got the truth book. And if you think about it, part of what went on is not just the mentality that Jehovah's Witnesses have, that any minute now Armageddon's going to come in, or is going to happen. God is going to step in and take care of all these problems for you. So you don't have to worry about it. This was what she was pretty much taught, that you don't have to worry about your past. You don't have to worry about your mental, emotional health issues, all of that. My stepfather started to show his violent temper after they were married. Well, you don't have to worry about that because the new system's going to be here. Not only was there that mentality, but when she got baptized, if I was 6 years old, I don't mind sharing this, it would have been 73. So they were still preaching 75. They deny it now, but we know that's what they were saying. So she was taught, 6 months from now, a year from now, tops, this is all going to go away. So for her, it was almost like an escape, that she could just keep going deeper and deeper into the religion and not have to worry about all these other things that had happened to her. Now her new marriage is falling apart. She's got this violent, nasty, person she's married to now. Well, don't worry about that. Don't worry about fixing that. Don't worry about addressing it. The new system's going to be here any minute now. And the worse that her life got, it seemed like the more that she sort of kept going more and more into the religion. She'd study more, go out and service more, all of that. It obviously was not a solution for her. She had nervous breakdown after nervous breakdown, attempted suicide, all of that, suffered from horrific depression, everything. But you can see how it was an escape, but not a healthy escape. She might as well have been taking drugs. She might as well have become an alcoholic for the type of escape that it offered her. She was not healthy. She was not handling things in a healthy way, but it was just her way of shutting everything out. If I just go and study the Watchtower, if I just go out and service, I don't have to think about all this other stuff. I think it's important for people to understand that type of mentality of the people who are in, the religion, and how it's not healthy. The thinking that they teach you, Armageddon's going to come here any minute now. I was 6. As of this recording, I'm a woman in my 50s. She threw away 45 years of her life a few months at a time because of this horrible, terrible, awful thing that they taught her, and also being miserable all that time with all her, mental and emotional issues.
Right.
So that's her background, and that's, I'm not a psychologist. I don't mean to speak for her, but being someone who lived in that house,
Mm-hmm.
I see what her thinking was. I see why she did the things that she did, and I see what they kept telling her and the damage it did. When they tell people, it's one thing to tell a child, don't go to college because the new system's going to be here. That's awful enough. But you tell someone who has psychiatric issues, well, don't worry about that. God's going to fix it all any day now. That's just awful. That is just absolutely awful. Look at the damage it did to her.
Yeah, and so many others. Now, how about you? How did this affect you as a child, growing up in this environment?
Well, part of the problem with when someone has that much of, the psychological, the mental, the emotional, being stunted, let's say, as my mother was, and not being healthy with it, you pretty much have to have a relative amount of health as an adult to be a good parent. My mother was so wrapped up in the religion and wanting to be so much deeper into it. To her, you had to do everything perfectly. If it was fun, it was evil. She couldn't, think about anything but the religion. She expected that out of her kids. Well, from a very early age, from the time I was, 6 years old, I remember reading some of the information in the religion and thinking, this is a load of crap. I can't, especially, part of it is especially how they would talk to women. Because I remember in a lot of the books, they would have counsel to the men, like this much, 3 sentences, and then like 3 pages of counsel to the women to be submissive and silent and obedient and etc.
Right.
And even at 6, I was like, this makes no sense. You've got 2 grown-up adults in the house. They should both be treated like adults, So I had problems with the religion itself, but then also the way that it affected my mother's mentality, that she couldn't be an effective, positive parent in any way. And then dealing with my stepfather's temper, because obviously I was, I got the brunt of it as well. I didn't buy into this thing that you should just be submissive and take it.
Right.
He certainly did, so there was no outlet for any of us, and not for me either, in religion. So here I was in a religion that was horrible for me, and one I didn't buy into in the first place, and then trying to deal with a mother who has mental and emotional issues to that extent. That's tough in any situation at all.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like every front, every single front, the religion just took and took and took, and there was nothing good about it for me, growing up at all.
Yeah. Now, what about your mother right now? Where is your mother now?
She is, she's still very active in the religion, absolutely. The funny thing is, a few years ago, we all grew up in Michigan. For those of you not in the States, that's in the northern part of the state. My brother, when he got divorced from his first wife, he met a woman here in Florida, where we are now. They dated, et cetera, et cetera. We kids all sort of came down one at a time following him. We were all down here. There's 3 of us. We were down here for a few years. My mother was still up in Michigan, married to my stepfather. And then she just finally realized, why am I with this man? And why am I in Michigan? I want to be, all the way across the country with my kids. And so she finally left him and she came down here. And the elders in Michigan, they were okay with it because there was some question about fidelity and all these things. And they said, you're not going to get married again. She's going to be 70 pretty soon. You don't have scriptural reason to get married, but if you want to get divorced, we accept that. So she came down here, and then one of the elders down here decided to give her a problem and say, you didn't have scriptural reason to get divorced, and et cetera, and you're not allowed to be a pioneer. And how is this his business? He's known my mother for 5 minutes, But she's
you're kidding me. He told her that because did she divorce your stepfather?
She divorced him, yeah.
And because she divorced him, she comes down here, down to Florida, reestablishes with the congregation. They find out all of her business like they normally do, and then they're telling her that she can't be a pioneer because she got a divorce?
She had been regular pioneering. She's done this on and off, over the last many years. Mm-hmm. She was a regular pioneer in Michigan. And again, the elders up there who knew her, who knew the situation, who knew, how abusive my stepfather has been over these years. And I want to qualify one thing before we move forward. My stepfather was never physically abusive, and he was never sexually abusive. I think it's only fair, to say that. But he has a violent, nasty, nasty temper, throwing things, screaming, swearing, the cops are being called because of his, words and all of that. Mm-hmm. But, that's enough to make anybody. And obviously, my mother was suicidal, so obviously this affected her. I mean, she'd been in and out of, mental hospitals, suicide attempts, all this type of stuff. So the elders up in Michigan, again, who knew her, they've known her for, her whole life. They said, you can't get remarried because there wasn't adultery there. But if you want to divorce him and move down with your kids and all that, we're absolutely fine with that. And so they were okay with it. But yeah, she came down here, and apparently there is an elder in one of my brother's congregation. One of those elders, he's got to have his nose in everything, and he's got to be, no, and I've decided, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, gave her the business and said, well, no, there wasn't adultery, and so she had to come off the pioneer list and all of that because she divorced him. The elders up there that knew her, they said it was okay. This guy has known her for 5 minutes.
And see, these are the kind of things, Alexandra, that I think a lot of people that's listening to this podcast, they don't really understand what goes on. And because, like you're saying, in one congregation, the brothers in Michigan, they were fine with it. But then she gets down here, and you got a whole nother attitude going on with these different brothers. And so people just don't understand that. And I'm glad that you're bringing this out. Yeah.
Well, this brother, as a matter of fact, when we're here in Florida, my own brother, he's a very nice guy. And I wouldn't say that if he was an ass, I'd be the first person to say it. He really is a very nice guy. But he's not very ambitious towards the religion. So he's in his mid-40s. He's not a ministerial servant. It's not like he's living a double life or anything like that. He just doesn't, pursue it. But he used to have a job where it was almost like an hour commute. So on their meeting nights, he would sometimes have microphone duty for the first part of the meeting. Well, he might have to be a little bit late because by the time he got back from work to the house and just had time to put a suit on, grab a sandwich, walk out the door, he's 5-10 minutes late. Well, this elder didn't like that and thought that he should be more responsible, leave work early, I don't know, become Iron Man, so he doesn't have to deal with traffic, whatever. And this elder kept pushing my brother to allow him a shepherding call, come to the house and visit him and his wife. My brother didn't like this at all. He doesn't like this elder, doesn't want him around the wife, etc. And my brother said, I'm not comfortable with it, not going to let it happen. I can't get there any earlier. Everybody else was okay with it. Any of the other men there would just fill in for my brother until he showed up. Well, this elder, during one of their elders meetings, told the other elders, I think that we need to counsel him and we need to maybe reprove him because, if I say that I'm coming for a shepherding call, then I'm going to come for a shepherding, and how dare he, and et cetera, et cetera. Because he has to work and support his wife and because he doesn't want you in for a shepherding call? Explain this to me. Fortunately for him, his father-in-law is an elder, and the father-in-law understands that my brother's a very decent guy, treats his daughter very well, etc. And the father-in-law just stepped in, look, you even go anywhere near him, I'm done being an elder. You're going to have to go deal with this whole congregation yourself. It's just not going to happen. But this is the controlling, I'm coming to your house to shepherd you and encourage you. And if you don't like it, I'm going to discipline you and reprove you. This is the love.
And see, your brother, he had the support of another elder,
yes.
Whereas other people, they're just out.
Right.
They don't have that.
Right, right.
So then people that's, viewing the video, they understand what you're saying, and they've been there, done that, because it happens to so many people. We also had an elder like that in our congregation. Well, wait a minute. He wasn't an elder. He came down from Bethel. He was at Bethel with my husband. Mm-hmm. And he was going through our congregation, intimidating all of the friends, but they would not reappoint him because they realized he was a problem. Right. And he was getting mad at JT because he thought that, why aren't you pushing for me to be reappointed as an elder? But even JT knew he was a problem. So this one sister wanted to commit suicide because he was trying to get her to be on the school, because he had been there for 6 months. He goes, I noticed that you haven't been on the school. And he wanted to know why she hadn't been on the school. So it got back to the elders that he was walking around, harassing the friends about why they didn't have certain positions and why they weren't doing certain things in the congregation.
It happens. And for anybody who says, that the elders are so loving and so kind, and, even going back to my experience, when my mother was like in the mental hospital, literally we'd have to call an ambulance, because she'd overdose on her medications and, have a breakdown and all of this. Either the elders never said anything to me. Now, I'm the oldest child and the daughter, the one who's got to pick up the slack, in the household, or they would yell at me. And they said, well, you just need to try to be a better kid. And then your father won't be so mad all the time and your mom won't be sick. I was a wonderful kid, by the way. I just would sit in the corner and read, right? But not only is it incredibly disgusting, to jump down the throat of a child whose mother just tried to commit suicide, but my stepfather was mad at anything. If I had not existed, he would still be mad, angry, violent, screaming, yelling. I had nothing to do with it. To put that burden on me is horrible in any situation, but it had nothing to do with him being angry and violent. So the idea that they're, you're loving spiritual shepherds.
Right.
My mother tried to kill herself, and I was just a kid. I think I was like 11 the first time she did this.
11 years old?
Yeah, the first time she had a nervous breakdown in the Kingdom Hall, which I think is not coincidental.
Oh, no.
And this was back, if I was 11, we're talking, late 70s, when they didn't understand nervous breakdowns and depression and all of these things, and they didn't know what to do, and et cetera. But not a word to me as a child, not a word to me. I didn't know where my mother was. I didn't know what had gone, we were at the Kingdom Hall, and next thing I know, I'm being taken home by this man. Where's my mother, right? And not a word to me at all. And this kept going on. Every 2 years or something, she would have a breakdown and, just horrible things. And they would either say absolutely nothing. You should know where your mother is. You should know what's going on.
Right.
Or by the time I got to be old enough to understand more about depression and her anxiety and all of that, they would just get mad at me and they would just yell, or they would, give me the very condescending, well, your mom just needs to be more, she needs to endure more. She needs to be stronger more against your stepfather. She needs to love him more and be more loving to him. And just, first of all, you're giving psychological advice to someone who's had a nervous breakdown. You're not in no position to do that. And second of all, where's the support? Where's the love, in any of this?
And your stepfather was not a Jehovah's Witness?
No.
And so all the women that I talk to is saying the same thing that you're saying. Mm-hmm. And most of the women that I talk to, their husbands were Jehovah's Witnesses. Mm-hmm. So they're telling the same thing to people whose husbands are not Jehovah's Witnesses. And in this case, they were also saying that you had an issue as a child. You should be a better child, and maybe you'd be a better person.
Right. There were two issues at play here that people, could maybe understand when it comes to a quote unquote unbelieving husband, someone who's not a witness. It was my mother's job to impress him so much with her submission to his abuse that he would then want to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And that was her obligation, for this. It wasn't just a matter of, hey, that's life, marriage is tough and you got to put up with it, and you can't get a divorce, so what are you going to do? But it was her obligation. As a matter of fact, there was a brother, and I hate using that word, I hate calling them that, but there was a man who gave a talk at a Kingdom Hall. And this man, I swear to God, he got up there and he said that if a woman has an unbelieving husband, it's her own fault. And obviously, she's not being obedient and submissive enough, because if she were, then he would want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And then he also, this is the type of person he was. He's up there on stage saying this. He was saying, how important it is for women to be obedient to their husbands and be obedient and be submissive. And he said that at the end of the week, he will sometimes, with his wife, he will stand there, take out his wallet, pull out money, show it to her, and then say, but you weren't obedient and submissive enough this week, and put it back in his wallet and walk away. He said this on the platform during a public talk. Now you could pick apart all the things that are wrong with that, but this was the attitude that was, taught. And when I was growing up, there were men in the congregation, like you said, the women whose husbands were witnesses were told this. I can name women who were physically abused by their witness husbands. One whom I remember was an elder, put his wife in the hospital. And the women were told, well, obviously you provoked him because you were not submissive enough, and you need to go home and apologize for provoking him into beating you. Now, if this is the attitude they're saying to women who are being physically beaten up by their witness husbands, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy out of them if you have a non-witness husband who's just being so verbally abusive and throwing stuff around the house and etc. So that was the part of it. I think the other part with me is that I think maybe they could sense that I did not fully, completely accept this religion. I was a good kid. There was no, running around or anything like that. But I wasn't sitting there at the meetings just all, oh my God, it's Jehovah, and oh no, we're going to sing a song. Oh, I just can't wait to sing. We're going to go out and sing. Let's all sing a song to Jehovah. I think they could sense that I had some issues, but instead of even trying to explain it, even trying to have a listening ear or understand why I would have issues, it was just resentment. You just do. You're not, little Miss Pioneer type of person. So shame on you. You're a horrible thing. Go away now. I felt like a pest the whole time. My mother's in a mental hospital, and I felt like the imposition to them.
Yeah.
That was definitely in play.
Well, how about your brother? How did they treat your brother?
Oh, my brother was loved. My brother was loved. He was loved in and out. Part of the thing with my brother is that he is my father's son. So in the house, he didn't get any, abuse, and with him being a boy and all of that didn't happen. But in the congregation, the men were way more loved. I think part of it is they would groom the boys. They wanted them to take on the responsibilities in the congregation. As soon as a boy is a teenager, he's going to be doing the microphones and, the literature and all of that. So they're giving them more attention so that they will become the little servants and take some of their work and responsibility and do the talks and all of that type of stuff. Right. But also just because he was a boy, the young sisters would flock to him. He's a good looking guy. And so they would, want to be around him and all of that. And I think he had he's in the religion now. So I think maybe they could sense that he was, indoctrinated where I was not. So there was a lot more favor to him, a lot more favoritism. And I think there were probably a lot fewer personality problems. I had, being abused at home. I would go to the Kingdom Hall. It was very difficult for me to make friends. Not that I was rude and nasty, but I wasn't as open. My brother's very gregarious and all that. But where is the understanding? I was the one taking the abuse, from both my parents by this time. So there's just no, when they say they're loving and they're kind and, all of this, it's just a load of rubbish. It really is.
And that's probably that's how I saw the religion and how I was able to wake up and really, and basically waking up when you see the things on the internet that you're reading about this religion not being the truth, and because of all the things that you're saying and how people treat you, is an easier way for you to say, well, you know what? It really makes sense that this is not the truth. I mean, and I think a lot of people look at it like that, because I think a lot of people, when they leave because of the reason why you're talking about. You know, you're saying all the bad things that happen to you and your family, and then they're like, I can't deal with this. I can't take this, but they don't know it's not the truth. Because I can't tell you how many times we get emails from people that are basically telling us that they walked away 20 and 30 years ago, and they're just now discovering this is not the truth on the internet. And a lot of people left because of what you're saying, you know.
Right. Well, you know, the other thing is that the religion does tout itself, you know, for lack of a better word, as one that is based on love. How often do they say that? And they will even claim that they're a loving religion, and part of the mark of being the true religion. They will say, what other religion loves, you know, their brothers and sisters so much and loves the neighbors and all of that. So this totally proves, you know, that we are the true religion. And it's like, well, if you're going to go and say that the true religion is going to have love, you know, you're pretty much saying that you're not the true religion, because when push comes to shove, anybody can use that word. Anybody can use the word love. Anybody can say that. What do their actions show? Are their actions really loving? I'm all about imperfections. People are going to be imperfect. I get that. It's a huge difference between human imperfection and just downright abusive, downright neglectful of children, of women in violent households. That's not loving, that's not being courteous, you know, the way they treat people.
I like what you said about it's not about imperfection, because that's what people try to say. Right. And in fact, when they start trying to leave comments on our YouTube videos, a lot of people have been known to say, they're imperfect. But I'm going to tell you what, I have had people on my job, people that I've known, that I grew up with, that were not Jehovah's Witnesses, that never treated me as bad as some of the people in the congregation. And they weren't Jehovah's Witnesses, you know? So you cannot come to me about being imperfect, because these people weren't being nasty. So what's wrong with these people in the congregation that's being nasty? Right. So those are the kind of issues these are the kind of things you got to kind of weigh out when you're looking at stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I call it defense mechanism. Yeah. People like to use it as a defense mechanism. They're trying to, they're trying to make up for why these people are being so nasty and mean, you know?
Yeah, they have to kind of downplay what's really going on and kind of, for lack of a better word, they have to whitewash it.
Right.
And, and the thing is, you can't argue with the fact that, yes, people are going to be imperfect. If anyone were to say, oh, well, the true church, the true religion should be perfect. But nobody's saying that. No one is saying, oh, they were imperfect, therefore it can't be them. They are abusive. They are abusive and nasty and neglectful and just absolutely horrific. The absolute exact opposite of love. So yeah, no, don't come out with it, leaving the toilet seat up, that's human imperfection. Forgetting to balance the checkbook, that's human imperfection. Beating up on your wife and saying it's her fault because she wasn't submissive, I'm going to have to say, no, that kind of crosses the line. We're not going to put that in the imperfection column, okay? We're going to put that over here in the evil column.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. Now, what about when you woke up, when did you wake up and discover, hey, look, this really isn't the truth?
For me, it was a very different process than a lot of, I know what other people have been through. Because I was never really truly indoctrinated into the religion. Like I said, from the time I was 6, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Now, I went through all the motions. I got baptized at 13. There were certain things that, yes, in all fairness, my phrase, that I will admit witnesses got right, a few things here and there about their beliefs and teachings and all that, that's fine. But there was always something, I just knew this was just not a good religion. It was not a good way of life. All the things that we talked about, I couldn't turn a blind eye to it. So when I got to be older, as an older teenager, my mother I think she kind of gave up on me. By the time I was like 16, 17, she stopped pushing me, and she's dealing with her own stuff now. So when I got to be an older teenager, my meeting attendance got to be very sporadic, all of that. When I was 17, I stopped. I had graduated high school semester early, moved out. You could just stop going to the meetings when you're a stupid single sister that nobody really cares about anyway. I don't know that they even noticed. So, I'd go to one meeting a month, and then it's one meeting every other month, all of that. And eventually I was just faded completely. I went back a couple times as an adult to try again. I'm thinking, maybe it was just because I was a kid and it was a difficult situation. I wanted to be fair. Now I'm an adult, now I'm away from it. I'm away from my mother and that whole, influence and all of that. I can look at it fairly. I went back maybe twice, and each time I was like, no, they're still pretty much anti-woman. They're still beating their kids at the back of the Kingdom Hall, just nearly killing them, with their discipline, and still, this whole nonsense about, the overlapping generation. I'm like, I get the feeling they don't know what they're talking about, or they're just making it up as they go along. It just got more and more ridiculous. The more straws that they were grasping at to try to keep those, rather than just saying, well, we're wrong and we don't know, but this is a good way of life, so just continue with our religion. They just kept trying to make up stuff, to make themselves sound good. But the last time I was in a Kingdom Hall, it has to be, going on 10 years. And that time I was there maybe a month, maybe not a month, maybe a couple of months. And I was like, you guys are still buying this? You're still, okay, all right. Oh, the governing body's still in charge. Okay, all right. Oh, you're still doing the women need to be submissive and obedient. All right, well, keep talking. Maybe something will change. But I knew at that time, there was no more, hesitation after that. That was the last time I ever even attempted it.
Now, when you went back to visit the congregation, was this the congregation that you grew up in?
No, this was the one that was different. I think someone had recommended it to me or something. And I will say that in this congregation, there were two elders who were very decent people. One of the elders was a very decent man. He tried to, show a little bit of an interest in my background and all of that. Funny thing is, though, and I'll tell you, just, these poor elders, the one in every 1,000 that's like a decent guy, to tell you even what they're up against. I had been in the congregation a few months. There were some issues with, I didn't want to go door to door. They couldn't find my publisher card. They kept forgetting to make up a new one, etc. And I finally realized, they don't even realize I'm alive. Why am I still trying? You don't want me here. I don't want to be here. I'm all done. So this poor elder, he called me up. He realized I wasn't coming anymore. And he said the circuit overseer was in town. He wanted to bring the circuit overseer to visit me. All right, fine. So the circuit overseer comes over. The man does not look me in the face. He walks into the door with his eyes on the ground. And you just immediately tell this man was like, just this gruff, you're in my house and you can't even look me in the face. But anyway, sits down. I'm going to hear him out, whatever, give him a chance. And he starts going on about something. And I told him that's not my issue, but here are some things I have. And I talked to him about, how women are treated. And he starts going on about, the usual, well, do you think like teenagers in Nazi Germany, like they should have just endured. And so can't you just endure as well? I mean, really nasty. And I said, do you realize you just compared your religion to Nazi Germany? And, told me that, if you're going to put up with Hitler, you should put up with our religion. That makes no sense. And so I can't remember what else was said, but I shared a few other things about, the same thing, the abuses and all that. And he got really nasty at the very last part of it. And he goes, you know what? I don't want to hear this. And he just like storms up. And the man who was with him, this poor elder, was like trying to calm him down even. And the circuit overseer gets up in this huff. And he turns on this and goes, you're just a man hater, that's all. And I'm shell shocked. I'm not going to tell this guy off. But I'm like, he's leaving anyway. So, okay, well, thank you for coming by. Thank you for visiting. Ushered them out of the house. And I'm thinking later, I'm telling this man about women being beaten up by their witness husbands and being chastised by the elders. And I'm the one who hates people? That's the problem here, is that I hate men? I'm talking about the men beating up on the women, but I'm the one who hates? And that just summed it up in a nutshell for me, that shame on you if you have a problem with what we're doing, with even abuses. Obviously your attitude needs to change. You're the one who hates people. And this was our circuit overseer. This is his big shepherding call on the woman who'd been in their religion all these years. With the background that I had, he knew my mother had been in and out of mental hospitals. This is how he's going to talk to me. He's going to scream in my face that he doesn't want to hear it. Okay, fine. I get to go to my grave knowing the last thing a witness man ever said to me was, I don't want to hear this. Okay.
Do you think that he was feeling that way about you because of your mother's background? Because you know, in the religion, they always size up various families, and they try to, you know, treat you according to what they feel your reputation is in the congregation. So your mother is having mental issues. She also has an unbelieving husband. So do you think that all of that information about your family is what gave him the disrespect towards you?
You know, that certainly may have been part of it, because I think if you're experienced at all in the religion, you know that there is like a certain, you know, if you want to say caste system, you know, in what goes on. You've got the elders, you've got the elders' kids, you know, they're always going to get the first of, you know, everything and attention. Like I was saying with my brother, he got a lot of deference, you know, a lot of favoritism and whatnot, because he's the man, all of that, and that's all perfectly fine. I think a big part of it, though, was that I think he was just irritated that you have a woman who does not buy into this idea that you should just put up with abuse. It's just all good, and you should just let yourself be abused, because after all, Jesus had that rough night, you know, the night that he was killed, and that's totally the same thing. And shame on you for just not getting it. You know, I just don't get it as to why this is a loving arrangement, why this is so loving, you know, why the religion is the truth, all of that. I think that's why when he walked in my house, he was already in a mood. He was already just, you know, he didn't even look me in the face. He was already gruff and angry. And I think he just resented, you know, I have to go deal with another woman here who just can't know her place and know that it's all fine and it's all loving. What a waste of time, etc. I really think that was, he did not, and he even said he didn't want to hear it. He did not want to hear. He didn't want to hear how it made people feel. That's what I was trying to tell him, that this is how you make women feel. You know, growing up in my house with all the things that I went through, the message that they sent to someone like my mother and to someone like me is that you are not important, not as important as your abuser. Whether or not they are in the religion, that is more important than your health, your safety, your welfare, your happiness. That's a message I was given my whole life. You should be more than happy to sacrifice even your well-being, even your safety, even as a child, so that maybe your stepfather will come into the truth. And even if he doesn't, he should just still be impressed by, I don't know, how well you can take a punch, you know, whatever. Mm-hmm. They don't care how it makes you feel. You know, that it erodes your self-esteem, it erodes your confidence. It makes you terrified. You know, children who grow up in these violent homes, I mean, the ones who are victims of the violence, even if you just witness it, you're anxious and panicky and you have nightmares and you can't concentrate. It affects you physically. They don't care. Just go and endure, go and do your thing, go and be who you're supposed to be, the little robot, you know, this little role that we've decided for you. And they don't want to deal with anything else.
That's true. Now, prior to the circuit overseer coming to visit you, had you spoken to the elders about how you felt about the abuse that you all were receiving in your home?
I had spoken to the elders over the course of the years on as many occasions as I could possibly get an audience. Not so much when I was younger, because when you're younger, you don't take the initiative, you know, to speak out or whatnot. I do remember there was a point when I had not been going to the meetings for a while. My mother had another breakdown, and she was, you know, again in the hospital and whatnot. And I was just up to here with it. I was just up to here with this nonsense. And I called one of the elders at her congregation, and this guy knew me and whatnot. And I remember I was at work, and I said, you know, my mother is in the hospital again. I think I just gotten a call or what have you. And I said, you know, I really need to talk to you people about what's going on. And you need to understand she cannot just endure as much as you keep telling her. And he started yelling at me. And I remember because I was at work and there was very close, you know, and the guy who was right there, he turned around, he thought it was a customer because I'm like in customer service or something. He thought a customer was like giving me the business, something we had done, because he could hear the elder yelling at me on the phone. You know, don't you just think your mother just needs to endure? You know, you just need to understand that you just have to be submissive and you just need to be silent with all this and your mother and blah, blah, blah.
Oh my God.
At work. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me, you know. But I'll tell you something else in answer to the question. My mother had gone to one of the elders. My stepfather had a horrible, incident. And I could tell she was breaking down. This was not going to, work for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to one of the elders in her congregation to his house, knocked on the door. He opened the door and she said, blah, 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 my husband, I don't think I'm making it, et cetera, et cetera. I really need to leave. I really need to get out. And the elder said to her, you don't have scriptural reason to leave. I need to go. And he closed the door on her, talked to her for 10 seconds with this. And she, from what she told my brother and all of this and what he related to me, she left his house, went to a park and had to sit on the park bench trying to compose herself, with this. But that is a sticking point with me as well, is that people will often say, well, why don't you just leave? If it was that bad, that she's in a mental hospital, that she's on all these antidepressants, why don't you just leave? Because the elders told her to her face, you don't have scriptural reason to leave. So it wasn't until many years later when we were all in Florida that I think then the elders realized, she can't do this with her son, especially halfway across the country. And she had already made the decision. And they said, okay, go ahead. You can't get remarried, but go ahead, do what you have to do.
Yeah, I think in listening to your story and what you're saying is that people have to realize that they have to take charge of their own lives, because you cannot let a religion dictate to you about what's a scriptural divorce or not in lieu of your happiness. You have to start making some changes in your life. And I think that's what a lot of people went through, what you're saying with the brothers, and telling them that they could not, leave. And actually, they weren't supposed to tell people that they were not supposed to leave. Really, they were only supposed to let them know that if they left, according to Watchtower teaching, they could not remarry without being disfellowshipped. And I think because they were a lot of untrained men and didn't understand it, which all of it's crazy looking back on it. I mean, who really cares about, whether you get a scriptural divorce or not? Because as long as the law of the land recognizes your divorce and you can remarry, who really cares about what your religion thinks? And then you find out, hey, look, this is a bunch of crock anyway. So, like I said, the reason why we put these videos out is that we're hoping that people are lurking. And we get a lot of lurkers out here. And that when they're lurking, they're listening to Alexandra tell her story, tell her experience, help them to appreciate you are not alone. Not only that you need to do something about getting out of these abusive relationships, because it's just a bad thing.
Well, one thing that I think is important for people to realize is that, I've made this point before, that if you were to go and look at Watchtower literature, go look at all the Watchtowers, all the awakes that talk about domestic violence, for example, you will never, ever, ever find them. Not only do they not recommend that the woman leave to keep herself safe, they never, ever talk about the effect on the child, ever. They've even given examples of the children being, abused in these situations. And it's still stay for the sake of the man, and he's going to be impressed. And 17 years later, look at this one, he came into the truth, and etc. They never talk about the effect on the children. And for them to ignore the child in all of this, those children are supposed to be God's little sheep too. If you believe in religion, you believe in church, they're supposed to be God's sheep, and they're growing up with this violence. And yet in my case, not only did they never tell my mother, well, how is all this affecting your children? She herself was breaking down to the point where she didn't want to live. She was, trying to commit suicide. Didn't matter to them. Much less did it matter to them how the children felt in any of this. And, if you think about it, their whole thing that my mother had to endure so that my stepfather would come into the truth, not only is he not in the religion, I'm not in the religion. So it doesn't always add up for someone to think, well, I need to keep doing this because my husband might come in. Your husband might never come in. Our children, what message are you sending to them about what God thinks about them? What is the value in God's eyes? It's even funny, my friend Bo Jewell, when he wrote his book, The Least of God's Priorities, if you read his book, that's why he picked the title, because what he was going through, he was a victim of child molestation in the religion. Well, that's too bad. The person who molested you is more important than you. their spirituality, their reputation more important than you. And that's what he talks about in the book, that he just felt like, he was lower than whale poo is how he talks about it in the book. So it's important, anybody who's out there lurking, if you're thinking you're doing such a great, wonderful, righteous thing in enduring an abusive marriage for the sake of your religion, they have no business telling you to stay there. And you really need to think about your health, your safety, and have you given any thought as to what's going on with your children? And if it's important to you that you present to your children the religion, what are you teaching them about your religion? Just staying, that's not enough so that your husband is impressed. Are your children impressed with this as well? The elders are not going to give you that message. They're not going to tell you to think about the children. But I'm proof positive, sitting right here saying, this was proof to me this was not the true religion, that they don't even care about the kids, much less do they care about the women in those situations.
Mm-hmm. And I think, what you're saying is like 20 times worse than what the average person goes through. And I can tell you, growing up in this religion, you were kind of stressed out. And I didn't come from that kind of a family. And not even having a stressful family, my father was not a witness when I was growing up. He didn't get baptized until like 1986. And that's a whole nother story. But bottom line, he didn't treat us bad. My mom and dad got along pretty good. But I was very uncomfortable with how I had to go to school and be jeered at by all these people at school for not celebrating birthdays and holidays and stuff. So now, listening to your story, I'm thinking, well, I didn't have all the turmoil in the family, but I still felt stressed out as a witness because of all of our little things we couldn't do. And so now you're dealing with all the stress and dealing with a very abusive family and stuff like that. So I can only imagine how I would have felt dealing with that,
Yeah. Being raised as a witness, unless you are someone who immediately accepts it and you're indoctrinated and you think it's the greatest thing, you think it's the truth and all that, it's difficult enough in the best of situations because, like you said, you are deprived of so much. And like I was saying earlier, telling a child, don't go to university, don't go and pursue your passion for music, art, literature, what have you, that's all bad enough. But when you start throwing violence into it, whether it's physical, sexual, mental, emotional, verbal, any of that, and then on top of it, that child knows, they know growing up that they are being abused because the religion says, well, too bad, you just have to put up with this. Or because the wife might wind up with the husband who knows that she just has to be submissive. And if he's got that mentality where he's going to take advantage of the position that she's in, again, that's because the religion is forcing her to stay there. So even in the best of circumstances, again, for lurkers, your kids are going to have a hard time. If you're living with somebody who's violent or whatnot, or you're, violent yourself, I can almost guarantee you are not doing the right thing by your child. And they are going to come to the realization sooner or later that it is the fault of this religion. The person who's abusive, yes, shame on them. They need to answer, absolutely. But why is the mom still in this situation? Why are we still staying here after all this time? You're going to know.
Now, how did that affect your relationships? Seeing your mother tolerate an abusive man, listening to the organization, how did that affect your relationships?
You mean like with men? Oh, it wasn't it wasn't good. No, part of it was, first of all, I was kind of, I got along better with men than I did with women, just because I sort of have a, strong personality and the things that I like, action movies and all this nonsense. So it was not a problem for me to meet men, to strike up a relationship with a man, all of that. But I always had that mentality, that thing in the back of my mind, that any minute now, he's going to tell me, well, you just have to be submissive. And then he's going to laugh at me for it. Because that was the other part of what I went through in going through all of this with, the men I knew in the religion. They would laugh at the women. Ha ha ha, you just have to be submissive, and it really stings. It stings and it sticks with you as a girl. So I always had that. And I was always like walking on eggshells, even with, I've dated some very decent guys, And it certainly wasn't their fault that I was always on guard with them and waiting for, that moment when he was going to say something awful. And what happened was, when I was younger, especially, and hadn't quite figured all this out, I would date a guy for a certain time, and then I'd break up with him just because I knew in my head, any day now he's going to tell me, that I need to be submissive, and he's going to start laughing at me, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the poor guy, some of them, they had no clue what I was doing, and I didn't know either, being a, young lady, I just, we can't see each other anymore, just because I was so uncomfortable with it. And it had absolutely nothing to do with them, but because of that mentality, that fear that they put into me of what it means to be in a relationship with a man. Even if I wouldn't have accepted it, being outside the religion, certainly I had the right to assert myself and say, but even going through that process, being afraid of a man saying that to you and having to go through that, it was something that it really took a lot from me, where I just couldn't, relax around a guy. I couldn't trust them in any way, and I couldn't see them for who they were, because there was always that filter, of the religion and the indoctrination and how they interact, and the things that they would tell me growing up.
Did you ever confide in the guys that you were dating that you were having these issues?
I'll tell you something. I told very, very few men whom I dated that I had been one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was not something that I liked to talk about at all. If it ever came up, about my family, I would just say, well, we're not close, and I would just drop it like that. And I remember one time I did drop a relationship with a guy because Christmas was coming up. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about the fact that I never celebrated Christmas, and I just didn't want to deal with that whole subject and have to tell him, I don't know what that means. What do you mean trim the tree? What does that mean? Do you cut it? Is that you're trimming it like that? No, that's not what it means. Okay, I don't know how to do this. I just felt like, and you think you're in your 20s or something, you don't know how to deal with those things, effectively.
Right.
There was a time or two, one or two men that I did tell that I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'd grown up. One of them did start to laugh at me, and he made fun of it. And I was not in a position to tell him why that was grossly inappropriate. Certainly today I would, let them know. But it shows the ignorance of people out there, and I don't mean to criticize them, but people really do think this is just a harmless, quaint little religion. That, the biggest thing is they knock on your door on Saturday. They don't celebrate Christmas. They don't understand the level of abuses. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear you dog out another religion, but you're really not dogging it out when you lived it.
Right. And it's hard for them to understand too, the extent, like I was saying a minute ago, of how much it really stings to be treated the way you're treated as a woman, as a young lady, as a little girl in this religion. Today, if you say something about it, that you're especially sensitive to the idea of women being told you need to be submissive, someone who doesn't understand, they're going to, make a joke about you being, a feminazi, or, oh, you feminist, always this and that, and you're so sensitive about things. They really don't get that you maybe grew up for decades with violence in your house because you were told to be submissive. You grew up with your whole personality being smushed and stifled. And especially as a woman, your job is to be an elder's wife and a pioneer, and that's it. You don't have any ambitions.
Did you get a chance to talk to a therapist throughout your life or after you left the religion?
No, and I probably should have, and I do recommend that people do that if it gets to that point. It took me a long time to peel away the layers of the religion itself. And if anybody else goes through that type of thing, when you come out of the religion, I strongly suggest, even my friend Bo, he says that when you close the door to a cult, the next door you open should be to a therapist. And I really feel like the religion took enough years when I was in, when I was fading and all of that. It took even more years, even when I was out. I was out physically, mentally and emotionally, was still being damaged by all of that.
Is this what led you to your activism because of your experience as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or you want to share a little bit about that with us?
That's one of the reasons I started my blog. Do something therapeutic. It was my way of saying things that you're not allowed to say in the religion. You know, things whether it was about doctrinal issues or the things we've talked about, you know, domestic violence and all of that. Things like how they talk to rape victims, you know, rape can be fornication, and picking that apart and just saying back, you know, things that, you know, again, I wanted to express, didn't have the chance or didn't know how. But I did notice that there seemed to be not as many women putting their 2 cents worth in all of this. But I would read, there was one website that I went to, and I clicked on the domestic violence category, and there were 2 articles about domestic violence. And I thought, you know what? I know more women that were beaten up by their witness husbands than the number of articles on this site. And I thought, you know, we need more women to be talking about these particular issues.
Now, do you want to give any closing comments or thoughts about what would you recommend to people who are in abusive relationships?
My closing thoughts to people who are in abusive relationships, I would say, you know, again, you really need to think about the children in it. If there are not children there or what have you, you have to really give a lot of consideration as to whether or not this is really what a loving religion and a loving God would want you to do. And I would really strongly suggest you start seeing the elders and the men who write the Watchtower, start looking at that with a critical, neutral point of view. I don't mean critical like criticize, but remember that they are just men, and they are very often misogynistic. You know, they can have their own opinions about things, egotistical, controlling. They can give their own opinions about your life, your relationship, all of that. Take a step back from that. Take a step back from all of that and ask yourself, what is the healthiest thing for you to do? And I don't think it's going to be to always stay, especially if the abuse is so severe. And if you are someone who has dealt with the way my mother did, you know, you have to have the antidepressants every day. If you've been in and out of treatment centers, if you have to see a counselor just to put up with your own marriage, that should tell you you're not really enduring the way that you think that you are. And maybe these elders are overstepping their bounds. But again, take a look at it. They say that they love their neighbors, you know, we love our congregants, all of that. Do they? Do they show that love with how they treat you, how they treat your family? Or are they just being dogmatic, making up their rules, wanting to be controlling, and are they very unloving? If so, that should tell you everything that you need to know about what you should be doing.
Yeah. And that's why we appreciate hearing stories like yours, because like I said before, people think they're in this by themselves. They think that, you know, they're the only ones that are going through this type of abuse. Mm-hmm. And I think that the internet is really blowing the lid off of what's really behind the curtain in this religion. So again, you know, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story on the Critical Thought. And for those of you who don't know who Alexandra is, get a chance to check her out on the internet. Her website is jwvictims.org. She also has a monthly magazine called Apostate Monthly. You can check it out at apostatemonthly.com. And also, she has a YouTube channel. Check out her new book, How to Reclaim Your Life When It's Been Stolen From You, either on Amazon or Kindle.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's really amazing what people's life experience has been being part of the Jehovah's Witness denomination. The experience that Alexandra related about her family, sad to say, is not a one-off. Her experience is something that so many Jehovah's Witness families, children, have experienced. And that is, how does the congregation deal with women who find themselves in abusive relationships? In fact, a few years back, the society was asked the question, my husband is beating me. Should I be able to get a divorce? Should I be able to get a separation? Should I leave him? Was basically the question that they were asking. And the answer that the society gave is a very standard answer. It's interesting that one of the things that they often will do is they'll ask questions, such as, what did you do to provoke your husband? Essentially, they shift it back to the victim. Over the years, the type of advice that people have gotten, it varies. I tell people all the time, how you will be dealt with in any congregation will depend on the guys who are elders in that congregation. It's just that simple. And what that means is you will get a variety of advice and information that will vary from one end of the scale all the way to the other. Some people will be given excellent advice, and others, the advice will be detrimental. And yet everyone is supposed to view their advice as this is what Jehovah wants me to do. And so the question about how to deal with abuse in a family is a question that often comes up. And when you look at the society's information, it's very interesting how they deal with it. Most people who've had any experience in working in a rape crisis center, an abuse victim center, one of the things they note is that the person typically does not have the self-esteem to actually do things by themselves. It often requires someone encouraging them. You need to think seriously about this situation. You need to get out of this situation for the sake of you and your kids. Well, the society tells the elders, don't tell the person, don't give any suggestions to the person, which is kind of ironic because the elders have always given suggestions. If a brother has his hair coming down too far on his jacket, on his shirt, they'll tell him, brother, your hair is too long. If a sister's dress is a little too short, sister, your dress is too short. If someone is missing meetings, they'll come to you and say, you might want to think about that job you got there, brother. So they've always given advice. But you see, the Watchtower, even though they have boots on the ground in 200 nations around the world, they have no rape crisis center. They have no abuse center where members of their own congregation can go to if they need to, or even just people in the community that they say they serve. As a result, there is no help. One of the common things that abused women will tell you when you talk to them is that they feel trapped and they feel they have nowhere to go. Now, here's a congregation. Here are shepherds. Here's a sheep. Sheep is being beaten. What should the shepherds do? The shepherds should make sure that person has somewhere to go. But no congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses will take the position. We will stand behind you, sister, if you decide to leave for the sake of yourself and your kids. All the other friends, we will support you. And that's really what it often takes when people finally leave abusive relationships. The knowledge of knowing that somebody is going to support them. And this is an area that Jehovah's Witnesses, they failed miserably. And it's understandable. Your typical elder, even including myself, we had no training in such things as human behavior, the emotional impact of people who are abuse victims, none of that. And so many sisters around the world have literally stayed in abusive relationships far too long simply because they felt they had nowhere to go. So when I listen to experiences like we just heard with Alexandra, it just brings back to all the people I've known over the years who I know as growing up as a kid. Their husbands were abusive to them. And no one in the congregation ever said, sister, come on over. You can stay with us. Bring your kids. None of the elders ever did that. So the sister had to remain. There was a Watchtower article that there was a question from readers. And it related the experience of a sister who was abused for 20 years. And then the article said, see, her husband finally changed. And so here we have someone who was a sheep that's being beaten over and over, and nobody was there to help her get out of that situation. Of course, you can't make a person leave, but what you can do is let them know that if they make that decision, they have somewhere to go. So as I said before, unfortunately, the experience of Alexandra is all too common. And that's why people who find themselves in these type of circumstances, they literally need to know that they have a support system that will help them regardless of what decision that they make. This has been JT with The Critical Thought.
Hey, Jay the Comedian here. Did you enjoy that video? Would you like to see more content like it? Then you gotta subscribe. And it'd really be a big help to JT and Lady C if you like the video and leave a comment. Make sure you hit this little notification bell right here. That way you'll know when another video gets posted. I really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next video.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.